Hey, listeners, I'm currently on a break so that I can rest, write, and prepare new episodes of the podcast, which will begin airing on Thursday, September 11th, 2025. I am so excited about that episode, which is going to be with Dr. Ingrid Clayton, where we're going to discuss her new book on fawning. It is going to be amazing. Until then, I've curated an encore season of some of the most popular episodes thus far. So if you're new to the podcast, this summer season is a great place to start. But if you've been around for a while, these episodes are definitely worth a second listen, and I know you're going to get something new out of each and every one of them. And I can't wait to hear what that is. So be sure to share that in the comments or text the podcast to let me know. All right, let's go ahead and dive into this week's episode. Welcome to Writing Your Resilience, a podcast for writers who want to create stories that change lives, especially their own. I'm your host, Lisa Cooper Ellison. As a writer and trauma-informed writing coach, I'm here to guide you on a transformative journey through the art of writing, self-discovery, and resilience. Each week, I'll share my best tricks, tips, and strategies to help you write more authentically, craft deeper, truer stories, and overcome the common storytelling roadblocks we all face. Together, we'll explore how to bounce back when life gets tough and stay connected to your inner calling. So grab your pen, your notebook, and an open heart. It's time to do the work that changes the world, one story at a time. I met Laura Cathcart Robbins in 2018 while participating in a memoir collective. Her essay about being the only Black person at the Brave Magic Writing Retreat had just gone viral, and she was in the process of creating her podcast, The Only One in the Room, based on the responses she'd received to it. Over the years, I've watched Laura take her podcast idea and turn it into an award-winning show, read her many essays on HuffPost, Oprah Daily, and The Temper, and cheered her on as she became both a Moth Grand Slam champion and TEDx speaker. I could not wait to read her memoir stash, My Life in Hiding, which I reviewed for Hippocampus Literary Magazine. I've always admired how Laura balances her fierce dedication to her writing with the work she does to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. To learn more about the many amazing things Laura does, please see the show notes. During our episode, Laura and I took a deep dive into what recovery is, how it helped her cultivate the honesty needed to write her memoir stash, and how she balances marketing her book with living life. Before we get to our conversation, I have a few questions for you. What is your relationship to honesty? Are there times when it's difficult to be honest? What supports your ability to be honest both in your writing and your life? I hope you'll ponder these questions as you listen along. Now let's get to my conversation with Laura Cathcart Robbins. Listeners, you might know that I've spent the last decade helping writers reclaim their voices after trauma, but this is what you may not know. I'm about to teach the course I've always wanted to create. Free Your Voice, Fuel Your Motivation is a 12-week mindful memoir writing program that brings together everything I've learned about nervous system regulation, creative flow, and writing with authenticity and joy. I've designed this to help you write the truest and best versions of your stories. This process isn't about pushing harder, it's about creating the conditions where your creativity can actually thrive. And if you're ready to reconnect with the writer you truly are, this program is for you. Applications will open on August 1st. Space is limited. If you're interested, visit the link in the show notes today to learn more. I would be so honored to work with you. Well, hello, Laura. Welcome to the podcast. I am so happy to have you on today.
Lisa, you know I love you. I'm so happy to be here too.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I was very excited, and I'm super excited because not only is it a treat to have you on here, but this is the week of your book birthday.
It is indeed. It was 1 year ago this week that Stash burst onto the scene.
Yay!
I mean, as much as a first-time memoirist unknown can burst onto the scene. But yeah, I'm actually celebrating this week and really acknowledging that. You were the first person though that reminded me that this was my book birthday week. So thank you for that.
You are very welcome. Yeah, I think the date is actually March the 7th. Today is March the 5th, so we're recording this 2 days in advance.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to share what your book is about because I want everyone to know, and then I want everyone to go and buy it if they haven't already done so. And then tell me how you're going to celebrate.
Thank you. I should probably have down by now talking about what my book is about, but basically, Stash My Life in Hiding is about 1 year, a 10-month period in my life in the year 2008. And during that year, I was getting a divorce. I was named Parent Association president. I was a mom to two boys. I was asked to join the board at their school. And in the entire time, and I lived this very like fancy Hollywood life with
Mm-hmm.
nannies and drivers and private planes. And the entire time I was grappling with a life-threatening and debilitating addiction. And so this book talks about the kind of the reckoning that I went through with the
Mm-hmm.
addiction and the effort to, the through line is really, I want to be a mom to my
Yeah.
kids and I want to be there for my kids. So it's the journey of me grappling with that and then really trying to get well, which was not easy for me and, took different forms and shapes during the book. So that's kind of, I mean, it's not really in a nutshell, but that's mainly what it's about, is that story. And to celebrate, besides the Instagram posts that'll come out on March 7th, Scotty is my boyfriend. He's in the book. He's one of the characters in the book. I met him that year of 2008. And so, we'll be together 16 years this summer. We are going to a variety of different bookstores and taking shelfies.
Yay.
So a selfie with my book on the shelf and just seeing where they are and who's carrying the paperback, which is
Mm.
also out now, which is very exciting because it has all the reviews in it and a whole section for book clubs in the back. So there's questions and topics, and it's just really cool. I love the paperback. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be going around and taking shelfies, and he'll probably take me out to lunch or something while we're doing that.
I love that. And I also
Yeah.
love that the paperback is going to have these book club questions because I mean, when I first read your book, I felt like, oh my gosh, this is totally a book club book. I mean, it's got so much depth to it. And what I love is like, and you explain this very well. You have this really tight timeline, which creates this intensity. There is such vulnerability. You take us
Mm.
deep into the experience of addiction and what it's like. And I mean, I felt so often when I was reading this, like I was right next to you, Laura. I felt like I was
Mhm.
right there with you, and my heart was aching. Just the pain and that desire to get well for your children, like that you wanted to be the mom you always wanted to be, and the struggle to have this very public life that seemed so good on the outside and to have so much suffering inside.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's thank you for that. Thank you for saying that you felt like you were with me. That's kind of the whole point of the way that I wrote the book, which is active first person.
Yeah.
I just kind of drop you in to the middle of a scene basically, and then you take the entire ride with me that way, like you're sitting on my shoulder as I'm going through all this. And it's the idea of writing it like that was I wanted to challenge myself to be as transparent as possible about what it was really like, because I had hidden what it was really
Yeah.
like successfully from even the people that were in my life at that time. Like a lot of them had no idea what was happening in my life until they read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And these are friends that I've had, for 30 years who just didn't know. So I was good at it, but I really wanted, I was so afraid of so many things coming to light, so many aspects of my life that I was ashamed of. And I wanted to be rid of that fear and that shame. And I
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I told my story in recovery communities for years, but I hadn't gone public with it. And I didn't know who needed to hear it. I didn't know who needed to hear, like, it was not easy. In fact, this was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
even while I was doing this, I hated it and I was resistant, but I was still willing. like I didn't know who needed to hear those things, but I knew that I would have, if in the year 2008, if I could have found that book. I mean, I don't know what it would have done, but I know that it would have been helpful to me to see what the reality is of being in a position where, you have access and resources to hide an addiction like mine.
Mm-hmm.
Without the access and resources, I could not have, you know, I wouldn't have been able to. So, but it allowed me to go longer than I should have. I don't like the word should, but I was doing a lot of damage to myself and to the people around me because of the length of time it took for me to get help. And I wanted that in the book.
And I think to me, that's some of the best writing. I mean, the whole book is great, but I think that honesty about what it was like and the struggle to get well is so important for people to hear. And I think it just makes me trust you as a narrator. And I love personally first person pieces that are very scene driven, which is what your book is. So it was like, not only is this a great story, but it's my story. It's my kind of
Yeah.
story. I love that
Yeah.
about it. So, one of the things you really wanted to do with this book is you wanted to get rid of the fear and the shame and come out, in a sense, to the world
Mhm.
about what had happened. And you've done that. So, what has the response been like?
The response has been amazing. I don't know what I expected, honestly. I think I think I expected for people to want to talk about the craft of the writing, but most people saw my book kind of on a tabloid level
Mm.
and were very interested in my journey and the relationships. I was a little surprised by that, but you know this. I've written a lot of articles for HuffPo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually their most prolific personal essayist. And I get trashed every time I write an article. There are these people who come for me, they love to hate me. There's a
Yes.
whole like section of trolls devoted to hating me on HuffPo, which is one of the reasons I haven't written on that site for a while or for that publication. It just gets like exhausting to kind of wade through
Yeah.
that negativity. And I thought, because this is my biggest writing experiences was that I would get the same thing with Stash, that people
Mm-hmm.
would come for me and tell me things like what a terrible mother I was and like what did I do to my kids and look, you're the responsible for the demise of your marriage. And nobody's done that. Everybody that's come forward, and a lot of people have come forward, mainly what I get is thank you. Thank you for telling this story. And very much like the article that I wrote that kind of started everything, which was about being the only Black person at a 600-person writers retreat.
Mm-hmm.
The responses I thought I would get to that article I thought I would just get Black people. Like Black people would be like, yes, I understand what that's like. I've been Black and white spaces, blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. But the responses I got to that article, which is what started our podcast, The Only One in the Room, were from people of all races, all ages, everywhere in the world. And that's what I found with Stash. I thought Black women would respond to it because there aren't any books for Black women out
Mm-hmm.
there right now that deal with addiction and privilege and race. But it's like everybody, mainly women or people that identify as female predominantly. But otherwise, there's really no median age, socioeconomic status, mainly Americans. But I'm texting with these people in the Netherlands right now who have a sober book club there, and they've chosen my
Nice.
book this month. And so it's like it's shocking to me how well received it's been. I really tried to temper my expectations going in. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't want to be holding out hope that it would do something that maybe it wouldn't do. So I
Mm-hmm.
really just tried to come in like, this is a teachable moment for me, or a series of moments for me. I'm going to learn what it's like to publish a book and to be an author and to claim that title. But beyond that, I'm not going to expect anything.
Well, I'm going to say that your experience has been a teachable moment for all of us because you have done it so beautifully. And
Mhm.
what has been exciting for me as your friend and someone who has watched this happen over the course of time is that Elle named it one of the best memoirs of 2023. You were recently on the New York Times article, 8 books to help you drink less or quit. You were in the New York Times before. You've been in Real Simple. You've been on an O magazine. So you've had all of these great accolades. And as I'm thinking, I was listening to you, I was thinking about, okay, what is it about Laura's story? Like, why does this resonate with so many people? And to me, it's the honesty. There's this way that you show up fully as yourself, warts and all, and you are willing to take us inside that world. And so many people have a mask on where they're trying to present in some way for whatever reason, because that's what Instagram says, or that's what they think society expects of them. There's so many ways that people do that. And you took the mask off, and we all benefited.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And, I think this is the right use of the word irony. The irony is that I'm a really private person. Like, I would never, ever discuss anything that went on in the bathroom or the bedroom personally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't discuss politics with people. I don't discuss religion. I feel like that's just information for me and doesn't need to be put out there in the world. So to write something, like you said, that's so vulnerable and honest seemed
Yeah.
really counterintuitive to my being private, which is another reason why it was so easy for me to hide, because I'm naturally private
Mm-hmm.
anyway. I'm not somebody who overshares.
Yeah.
I rarely overshare anything. I'm much more on the other side. But being honest and real about what's going on in my life, and even just, with what I'm thinking about and what I'm feeling, has been really the cornerstone of my recovery. And so there's, a service element to the 12-step program that
Mm-hmm.
I'm in. The 12th step is service,
Yes.
and it's carrying the message to the next person who suffers. So I looked at this book as that on a broader scale. I'm carrying my message to people, whoever might want it or need it or find it. But that sounds selfless, but it's not. It's to bolster my own recovery,
Mm-hmm.
and to solidify it. And by having, nothing, like that kind of thing and that Eminem does in 8 Mile, where at the end in the rap battle, where he like basically says everything they could use against him.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
that was another thing that I did, was just like, I 8 Miled it. Everything's out there. Nobody's going to come up behind me and say, well, you didn't write about this. That should have been in the book. There's nothing out there that wasn't included in that year in my life.
I love that concept. You eight
Yeah.
miled it. And what I love about this is, this leads to one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was recovery, just as a general principle, and how your recovery program has helped you be honest and do this work. And so I think you and I both know that 12-step recovery programs is just one of the ways that people can recover and, get their sobriety. And yet, there are some things that are very specific to 12-step recovery that work, just clinically work. So I want to name some of those things for people. Number one, confidentiality. They call it anonymity, but there is a confidential element to it, which means it's safe space. And within that safe space, one of the things that's really important is being honest. And one of the things that fosters that is all of the sharing that happens within the rooms. And I can say this because I've been in the rooms, right? So this is not me just thinking about this academically. It's having worked the steps, and those steps are part of my everyday life. But if someone is thinking like, well, what could recovery look like for me? Here are the ingredients. Again, that confidentiality, mutual support, which shows up again in the sharing and sponsorship. There's a framework for operating within a group, which is so important because so many of us grew up in spaces where there were no boundaries, there were no operating principles. And so we're
Yeah.
trying to figure that out. And then there's a framework for making meaning of your experience through a spiritual program and, your personal relationship with whatever you see as higher power, as well as a way to have agency, which the 12th step, that's one way. And also I think of making amends 4-step inventory, which is where you're really taking a look at your life. All of those things are the ingredients that can support someone's sobriety or recovery from many different things. And so, as you think about all of this, how did these ingredients or anything else support the kind of recovery that would allow you to be so honest when you are a private person?
Wow, you really broke it down.
I thought about it. I was like,
Yeah,
what is all of this?
that was a really good breakdown. I really enjoyed a cocktail of drugs and alcohol when I was using and drinking. I could never just take a pill or take a drink. I needed to mix a bunch of things together in order to get the relief that I was seeking. And I found that this is the same for me in my recovery, that I can't just do one thing. I couldn't just do a step and get the relief that I needed. And let me preface this by saying I didn't want to do any of it. And because I've been doing it for so many years on a regular basis, I don't have the same resistance to it, but I still don't really enjoy it, honestly. I don't ever love the idea of going to a meeting in the same way that I don't love the idea of going to work out, but I do it anyway. And I do it on a regular basis. And, I food prep on Sundays. I don't look forward to that, even though it can be kind of enjoyable from listening to a book or a podcast. But I'd rather not. I'd rather skip food prepping because it's shopping, it's chopping, it's, all this stuff. So, but I do it anyway because those things make me better. Even if they don't make me feel better in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
I am better because of it. I make better decisions. I'm less reactive and more responsive. I can show up more as the woman I want to be
Mm-hmm.
than the woman I might have been before I did all these things, before I took care of myself. And so you're absolutely spot on. I think that I learned, I had a lot of tools when I got into the rooms of recovery. I'm a very boundary person, but I didn't have the tools to be vulnerable. And I don't mean ever, but not in a way that was helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly have been vulnerable throughout my life, but it was very selective when I would allow that for myself. And what I found pretty quickly in recovery was that vulnerability was really important for me to get well.
Mm.
The secrets I had been holding on to, not the private things, but the secrets I was keeping were killing me, even in
Yes.
recovery, even without a drink or a drug. So I chose to engage in this work the way it was suggested to me. So I did everything. I did everything that was suggested, from sitting in the front row of meetings to making sure that I always thanked the speaker. I got there early. I stayed a little bit late. Like all the stuff I didn't want to do. I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
be seen. Sitting in the front row meant I had to be seen. I would have
Yes.
rather sat in the back and arrived late and left early. But I did everything. And, I found as time went on, like, oh, this is what I need to do
Yeah.
to be the woman I want to be or the person I want to be without the gender. I have great admiration and respect for a lot of people in my life. And I've always kind of wondered what the secret ingredient is to like how they live their lives with such integrity and pride, but the good kind,
Mm-hmm.
and like the pride of work and ownership and confidence and generosity. Like how to be generous when someone's
Yeah.
just getting on your nerves, or messing with you or has slighted you or wronged you. How do you be generous with that person
Mm-hmm.
anyway? I
Yeah.
didn't know how to access that. And that's what I learned in these rooms through the steps that you mentioned. I learned how to access curiosity and generosity. And for me, it's a shift. Sometimes it's meditation, sometimes it's prayer, sometimes it's just, I'll get back to you in 24 hours and
Mm-hmm.
taking that 24 hours before I respond. But I learned those tools in the room, I was 44 when I came in. So I've been learning this stuff for the last 16 years.
And I'm trying to think of how long you'd been in recovery by the time that we met, because I think it was 2018. It was
Yeah.
your article, which will be in the show notes so everyone can read it, about your experience at Brave
Brave
Magic.
Magic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was 2018. And
Mm-hmm.
it was the impetus of all that. Like it had just come out when we first met. And one thing that has been my experience of you is that you are a woman who knows what she wants and is willing to do what it takes to get there. And, in terms of your book, I really want people to read it. So we're not going to talk about some of those things like, OMG, you did everything. And there is some stuff in here, like you just have to read the book to see like the length she was willing to go in order
Yes.
to not just, to maintain your sobriety. And so I've just watched you do everything you need in order to get this book out in the world in the way that you have. And there's like a way that you know how to channel your energy, or I've seen you do that. I want to know how you do it. Like, what is it that's inside that you draw upon inside you that when an agent says like, yeah, this is a great story, you don't have enough platform, you're like, okay, I'm going to create the platform. And then all of the other things that you've done.
Mm. Thank you for that. I feel very, very warm and glowy from the idea that I'm seen that way. I think there's a couple of things. One, I've always written. I've always written. I've written since I was, 5 years old. But I didn't ever know if I would be a writer, like
Mm-hmm.
if that was going to be my career. And when I decided that I really wanted to give that a try, which is, after I got sober, to as a career, to really give it an honest try, I decided, and I was in a place in my life, my children were almost out of high school. I was in a steady, long-term committed relationship that is pretty much drama-free, which was a brand new experience for me. I was settled in where I lived. I was stable
Mm-hmm.
at this point. I mean, obviously life was in session, but I was stable. And I thought this was a really good time for me to just try it. But if I was going to try it, I was going to do everything, just like I did with recovery. If somebody gave me a suggestion and they were someone who had what I wanted, I was going to take it and at least try it, and see if it works. I've tried things that don't work for me that well, but I've tried them anyway. And the agent who rejected me, one of the 16 agents who rejected my first book proposal, who gave me this laundry list of things that I should try, I was like, yes. I didn't even see it as a rejection. I saw it as this is the path toward publishing your book.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, try some storytelling, start a podcast, write and publish some articles, do some speaking, try to get a TEDx talk, like all these things. And I wrote them all down. I didn't need to write them down actually. But I wrote them on a list. I had her email back to me that laundry listed them out. And I decided someone had given me a blueprint. And so not only did I want to get published, but I wanted to get published by one of the big five houses. If it hadn't happened that way, I'm sure I would have been really happy at a smaller press, but that's what I wanted at the time. I wanted my book to go at auction. I wanted there to be like a little bit of a bidding war, for it. And I wanted to have that experience of an author's tour. Like these are the things that I wrote down that I wanted. And what I saw this rejection as a blueprint toward what I wanted. So I just decided to do it. And I also want to just say that I have space in my life for it
Mm.
because of the stability I mentioned,
Yes.
because this is not how I support myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't support, I make money from it, but it's not how I support myself. If it was how I supported myself, there would have probably been more efforts in different directions, to
Mm-hmm.
create different income streams around my
Yeah.
writing. But I was able, and I'm very privileged, and I acknowledge this privilege, to really just devote all this time to seeing if I could make this work and to trying
Mm-hmm.
as many things as were suggested to me. So I tried everything and embarked on all these different journeys to create that platform. And so, then I get the agent And then she sells the book at auction to Simon and Schuster. And I work with an editor of color, which is what the other thing I wanted. I really
Yes,
wanted an editor of color. And I'll just make a footnote here. There aren't very many
they're
of
not.
any color. There
Hmm.
just there just aren't very many in the publishing industry, which is baffling to me and a shame. But I have a beautiful editor, and she and I worked together and got the book out, and I got the book tour. And so I've now had the experience that I wanted, and I'm very grateful for it.
And what I'm going to say when it comes to that list, it was like check, 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 check. I mean,
Yeah.
and I say that because you're a Moth Grand Slam champion. You have
Yes.
an award-winning podcast, the only one in the room. If anyone is listening and they're like, I want to hear the best podcast out there, they need to listen to your podcast because it
Thank
truly
you.
is. I mean, even from the first episodes, I was like, wow, this is
Mm.
produced so well. The storytelling is so good. You're a great interviewer. I mean, there's so many great ingredients for that. Your writing is stellar. You have published, different articles for HuffPost. I'm going to link a couple and I'm going to ask you just by email to give me a couple so they're in the show notes. So you did all of those things and you recognize that you have a certain level of privilege to be able to dedicate all of this time, which not everyone does. And yet it was the fact that you did all of this stuff that helped you get where you are. So as you think about your career now, what's next?
Well, yeah, I mean, you and I were talking a little bit about the marketing part of it, which
Yes.
is still part of it. I got to say, I find very really depleting the
Mm-hmm.
marketing part. I get very inspired and excited. I was at an event for the McDowell Foundation yesterday. Are you familiar with them?
I am.
Yeah, and I was not, but my friend happens to be the executive director, and I was just listening to these different authors, mainly fiction authors, but
Mm-hmm.
talk about, dreading the blank page and what they do to get through writer's block. And my goodness, I recognize how lucky I am. I have not experienced writer's block. Like, I can't wait. I'm like slapping my hand in my fist. I can't wait to get to the page. I'm always writing in my head and it just pours out of me when I sit down. I love that part. The part that I find very depleting is the marketing of myself.
Yes.
I have a little bit of an easier time marketing the book, but that's only part of it because it's a memoir and the book is
Mm-hmm.
me. So I must market myself. And that, man, that just, it feels all kinds of wrong to me to do that. I don't enjoy the spotlight. I enjoy speaking at like when it's helpful to people, like at recovery
Mm-hmm.
meetings or at, I've spoken at different rehabs and like that kind of thing, or for women's groups, or I enjoy that, but just to like be pitching myself out there,
Right.
ooh, I do not enjoy that. And so what I did is I hired a guy who ran our podcast Instagram to run my personal Instagram. It's supposed to be for a finite period of time, but he's still running it. So he's like my boss. And he says, I want videos on this, this, and this month. And I'll make those videos. And Scott shoots them. So I'm the talent in the video. We send them to him and then he cuts them up and repurposes stuff. And he just goes all month with these things that I send him. And I don't have to like or follow or
Mm-hmm.
hashtag or do all the stuff that just makes my mind lock up. And when I was launching the book, I hired a podcast publicist, Tink Media. I have to give them a shout out. They were incredible. I mean, incredible. Simon and Schuster Publicity was great, but Tink Media, I was doing so many podcasts. I was doing 3 and 4 a day. And when I watched my book sales, when I was on Tamron Hall, there was a big spike in book sales.
Mm-hmm.
When I was on MSNBC, there was a big spike in book sales. But the steady lift of sales came from those podcasts.
Mm.
And because I did so many, they were released, for the next 4 months. And so every week, there was 3 or 4 podcasts interviewing me about Stash, and that was incredibly helpful. And I took some of my advance money to hire her because I figured that was a good reinvestment of that money. I would highly recommend that.
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up. And some of the things that I want to point out that I've seen you do And we can talk a little bit about creative nonfiction marketing because it's different, right? All of those fiction writers that you were around, the reason that they worry about the page is they don't have to do all of this stuff. And there's a great blog post that Jane Friedman just put out, and I'm going to put it in the show notes. And she was talking about how, yeah, if you're a children's book author or you're a novelist, you don't need a platform. You don't
Right.
have to do those things. I mean, you have to write really well and you have to come up with a great story, which of course we do too. But there is a certain kind of marketing. And what I notice, and I'm pointing this out because you do it so well, like, on the video, if anyone's looking, and if you're not, go to YouTube so you can see Laura in all of her glory. Her book is in the background. We were recently at AWP together and I got to get a hug from her, which you're the best hugger ever, just so you know.
Oh,
You truly are. You know, she had her book front and center, and you had this like water bottle that also said stash. Nice product placement. There you go. And you had a bag that also had it. So you had like these things that could serve as reminders. Hey, I'm an author. I have a book out. You have your podcast. You're able to talk about it there, and you have stashes on your podcast website page. I mean, you have all of this placement. And when I was looking at all of the places you have things, I was feeling tired. So I was feeling tired because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff that we have to do. And so, how do you care for yourself when you know that this work is both essential to sales, which, you have to sell a certain number of books so that you earn out and you get a chance to do this again. And also, it's exhausting.
yeah. I mean, thank you for noticing all that. And I have to just shout out Simon and Schuster's marketing department. There is a multicultural marketing department within the marketing department. They select 5 books per year to devote funds toward
Mm-hmm.
and effort. And they selected Stash last year. So that's why all the merch came because they devoted those funds to it. And so we got tote bags and we got water bottles, which was really helpful. Every
Yeah.
time I went to a book event and I gave the tote bag strategically to my friends. They sent them to influencers. So there's influencers walking around with my Stash tote bag. That was really nice. It's not something that I could have afforded to do had I not had that extra lift from them. But the way I take care of myself, and this I learned from you, Lisa, and I just didn't know how to articulate it until I heard you talk about it at AWP. You were talking about writing about trauma
Yeah.
and how one takes care of themselves. And you talked about 3 phases of that: the prep,
Mm-hmm.
the during, and then the post, to leave space, right? Leave
Yes.
space before, make sure you have space during, and then make space for yourself afterward, which I don't always do. And I wrote that down. And I also told my writing students about you and what you said, because I think that's just so important. I always made space during,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't always make space afterward, and to plan, like bake that in to the writing afternoon or whatever it is. But the way I do take care of myself is shades of that. I always look at my calendar. I never put more than one outing a day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't piggyback, I don't bundle things unless it's doctor's appointment. I might do those back to back, but typically I only put one outing a day. And I have 3 days, 3 weekdays that are just for writing.
Nice.
Maybe I do other stuff too, but they are blocked out for writing. So we do our podcast interviews on Mondays. So I know on Monday I'm going to be doing that. So I do like all of my admin work on Mondays
Mm-hmm.
and kind of get that out of the way. We do our interview. And then Tuesday, I might go to lunch with my girlfriends, or I'll try to reserve it either one of those days, Monday or Tuesday. Or I could do an evening, a dinner with somebody, or an event in the evening. But I really try to make sure I don't overschedule myself so that I have all the energy, like the water bowl, the well is
Mm-hmm.
full
Yeah.
when I go to pour myself into this writing. And that is, even if I weren't writing, that's good for me.
Yeah.
And so to do with marketing, which is even more depleting, I do not devote 3 full days to marketing, but I do make sure that I am not overscheduling myself, that I'm fed
Mm-hmm.
with nutritional food, because I've learned, I'll be 60 this year, that I just can't eat anything and feel okay. I
Yeah.
can't. I'd love to. I'd love to drink Pepsi and eat pizza all day, but I haven't had Pepsi in I don't know how long. But I need to eat for fuel
Mm-hmm.
and taste, but it needs to be fuel as well.
Yes.
I need to enjoy it, and it needs to be fuel. I need to get sleep. That's really important for me. I'll forego an evening event if it's going to interfere with my sleep,
Mm-hmm.
especially since I was addicted to sleeping pills for so long. I don't want to mess with it. Like if I have a
Right.
sleep groove going, I'm taking it. So I just, I just try to parent myself really around it. And, like I would make my kids do their homework, but then we would bookend it with fun stuff. That's how the marketing thing is for
Mm-hmm.
me. You're going to have to do this, but let's do this first. And then afterwards, you get to get back into The Sopranos again, because that's what I'm rewatching right now.
Nice.
And, stuff like that. So I guess it's just parenting myself.
Yeah. And one of the things that a parent has to do is say no. And so that was one of the other things I talked about at AWP is that, especially for new writers, we think, oh my gosh, I've gotten an opportunity. That means I have to say yes. And if I get 5 opportunities, I have to say yes to all of them because the opportunities are going to dry up. Have there been times when you've said no because it would have infringed upon your self care or it just wasn't the right opportunity? And you don't have to name the opportunity, but just a scenario where no was also a part of the equation.
I mean, definitely in my life, I'm trying to think of in this past year with Stash. I mean, I kind of said yes to everything. I really did. And there were a few podcasts that I said no to because I had this amazing podcast publicist. She would send me, downloads and subscribers. And there were some that just, if I were going to do this or this, I would rather do the podcast that had, to maximize the effort for me.
Mm-hmm.
So maximum number of listeners. So I did that a few times. There were a couple of events that were out of town where I would have had to pay for myself to go
Mm-hmm.
there. And I was just like, I'm not really sure if the benefit here is worth what I'm going to expend traveling there and putting myself up. So I said no to stuff like that. But most of the time, I just, during the author's tour, I really just put my head down and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, from March 2nd through April 28th, those were the actual dates. You're just going.
Yeah.
You're going and you got to take care of yourself whenever you can. And you're not doing anything else. Forget anything else that's like anything. You're
Mm-hmm.
not, we stopped recording the podcast. We recorded in preparation for it. We batched all those episodes ahead of time so that all I needed to focus on was the author's tour. And so there was that,
Mm-hmm.
I moved everything else out of my life, but yeah, I mean, it was really head spinning and exhausting, even still.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
every author I've spoken to has said the same thing that there is this period of time that is so frenetic. There's so much you have to do. And now that you are getting ready to celebrate your book birthday, and you are, through that first year of the book, of course, you're going to continue to market it and make sure people know about it. Are there any new projects that you're working on, or is there a different direction or something on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I mean, two things. With Stash, I'm really focused on book clubs right now.
Mm-hmm.
So in the new paperback, there's a whole section on topics for discussion. It's devoted to book clubs.
Yeah.
And so I have brought somebody on for a 90-day period to suss out, find all these book clubs for which I'd be a candidate, for which Dash would be a candidate. That's like African American book clubs, Black book clubs around the world, sober book clubs,
Mm-hmm.
mom book clubs, like all of those book clubs. There's a couple more. And she's, put together a spreadsheet for me and she's reaching out to them one by one and we're starting to get hits. So
Nice.
this was the thing that was suggested to me by my agent and my editor, that there's really nothing the publisher can do at this point for the book. They're not going to devote any funds toward it when it's in paperback.
Right.
But this is when book clubs pick up. So this is the suggestion I was given was to go after them. So we're doing a book club campaign on Instagram that'll launch soon. And then I'm doing this extra effort to where I've put in, and I'm sure your listeners know this, but the way most advances work is you get them in installments. The first when you sign the contract, the second when you turn in the manuscript for first pass. And there's sometimes a third and a fourth. The third when the book comes out in hardcover, and the fourth when it comes out in paperback, but sometimes it goes straight to paperback. So there's just a third installment. So with this fourth installment that I got when the book came out in paperback, I used some of that money to hire this person to push for book clubs. And that was, I knew that I was going to do something like that with that money. I didn't know that it would be specifically book clubs. So that's one thing that I'm doing. And the other thing that I'm doing is I'm finishing, almost done. I'm about 69,000 words in. My goal is 80,000 words of autofiction, which is autobiographical fiction, which just means memoir with some added stories that may or may not have happened, and some bundled events that maybe happened 3 years apart, but in my book, they're all happening within the same month. So like stuff like that, which you can't, or which I don't do in memoir, because I want to be as true to the memory as I can be in memoir. So, but yeah, this is a new thing for me. I have not written fiction before. And I mean, I wrote stories when I was little, made up stories, but this is to write an entire book is brand new for me. And it took a while. I was sending in pages from probably April of last year to my agent, and everything was like, no, this isn't it. No. And then finally in December, she's like, you got it. Keep going. Don't send it to me until it's done. This is it. So that's what I'm doing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited about this. And, people often think, oh, does it always have to be memoir? Or, oh, is memoir truer than fiction or autofiction? And that's not necessarily true. I think what I always tell people is think about the contract you want to have with a reader. And sometimes the most powerful thing is the fact that it really happened. And sometimes the most powerful thing is what you can do with it when you can bend the truth. And there are ways that you can do all of the things you just described, compressing and combining and making things happen that didn't happen, which is refreshing.
Yeah.
I do find that refreshing because I'm working on a novel myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Once I kind of got the groove of it, I'm having a lot of fun with it. And what I find is the scenes that aren't directly based on things that happened in my life are harder for me to write. Almost everything in the book is something that happened, or at least the basis for it is there. Like it's about a Black publicist in the 1990s in Los Angeles who owns the only Black owned entertainment PR firm, which was me. And I have all these crazy stories, about that time I did music and film and TV. So I got to put all those in the story. If I have to change the names, I'll change the names. There's a lot of, really cool celebrities in them in the story. But the work for me is, okay, I need a scene here that didn't happen. So how do I create this scene out of nothing? That's hard for me.
The fear of the page.
I'm still writing though, and something else that I learned at a writer's retreat was put your hand over the stove and see what's hot. You've heard that? Yeah. And
Yeah.
so instead of sitting in front of a scene that I don't know how to write, I jump to the next one that I do know how to write. And then inevitably I'll start to get ideas for the scene that I didn't know how to write. Like, oh, this should
Yes.
happen like this. So I don't stop writing, but I do sometimes stop writing that scene.
I love that strategy. And it's such a good one because sometimes once you've gotten, the next scene out of your system, you can go, "Oh, this is how I get here." And so that's what has to happen. So I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I know you have some place to be today, and I could spend the next 3 hours talking to you. But I'm going to ask you just a couple of quick questions. And one is, what is the best piece of writing advice you've received?
Oh, it's definitely the advice that you gave, the
Oh,
how to, it really, truly, I mean, that was really profound, and like it changed the way that I think about how I write, because I do write about trauma. And just like, I mean, when you said that, when you said to, set yourself up with time before and give yourself the time during the scene, and then to make sure that you have, I called it a denouement, but like some
mm-hmm.
post time afterward to, do whatever you need to do during that time, to sleep or to replenish or to eat, but just
Yes.
where you're not obligated to be somewhere or do something right away, if you can help it, right?
Yes.
Sometimes our lives are such that we can't. So the idea would be to do as much of that as you could
Mm-hmm.
in these busy days. That'll stay with me for the rest of my life. That was one, I said I've been doing some of that, but the way you articulated it as a tool just made so much sense to me. And this light bulb came on, and I was like, yes, this is going to be my schedule from now on.
Nice.
This makes perfect sense. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you how I came up with this, which will not be a surprise once I start talking about it. The reason why I chose to do this is because I didn't before. And, as a trauma survivor, I can go to like the deepest, darkest place. And then I would be like, and I did this with therapy for a while. I had therapy during my lunch hour at work. This is like the worst possible thing you can possibly do. Like,
Yes.
okay, let's go into like the deepest, hardest stuff. Now it's time to do spreadsheets.
Right.
I mean, like this horrible thing that I would do to myself, and I realized that it was actually harming me and depleting me more. And I would do that with my writing practice for a while. And so I thought about 12-step programs and the concept of bookending a hard situation. Like, you've got to do something really difficult. You might talk to your sponsor before, do the
Right.
thing, talk to your sponsor after, come up with a plan for how you're going to take care of yourself. And I was like, that's pretty brilliant. And I think it works for writing too.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does. It really does. But the structuring of it,
Yes.
I heard from you differently than I've heard from any other source. So I really appreciate that. I'm so glad that I went. I probably, just knowing you, it might have come up eventually anyway. But having heard you say that, and with my little notebook out and my pen that I stole from Melanie, um, was just the perfect moment for me to take that in.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And for anyone who's listening, I was like, who's Melanie? We're
Yeah.
talking about Melanie Brooks, who
Yes, we
was the
are.
first interview for this podcast.
Ah,
So
yes,
they have some way to learn more about her. But
that's
yeah, I
right.
really appreciate that. And we've talked a lot about self-care, and I know recovery is a huge part of your life. What is one way that you nurture your resilience?
One of the ways, because I'm a liar by default. And this is not just like to manipulate you or get, I guess it is to manipulate you, but not to manipulate you out of something or into something necessarily. But I was someone who always said I was 5 minutes away when I hadn't left the house yet. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want you to, I want to manage your response
Yeah.
to whatever it is that I'm doing. And so one of the ways that has been really helpful for me is when I default to that, if I told you that I was just about to jump on this Zoom and I was still in my car and I wasn't, I go back and clean that up immediately.
Mm.
And I say, hey, I know this doesn't, really, it's not pertinent to the interview itself, but I needed to let you know that I told you I was about to jump on when I was actually still in my car. It's
Mm-hmm.
really important for my recovery to
Yeah.
let you know that. So I hope you can receive that. I'm not trying to make you feel any certain way about it or, clear my name or anything, but I need
Mm-hmm.
to say these things out loud. And so it's kind of a joke among the women I sponsor and people in the community that I do these callbacks. I don't do them as often anymore because I don't feel the need to soften the truth anymore like that
Mm-hmm.
as often, but it's still my default. And when I do, I clean it up. And that has been really helpful to me. The other quick thing that I'll say is not saying anything about anyone unless I'm sure that they would be okay with it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't talk to you about Melanie about
Mm-hmm.
anything unless I was absolutely sure that she would be okay, because that is not good for my soul,
Mm-hmm.
to engage in those types of things. And it's also can be potentially really hurtful to somebody, which is also
Yeah.
bad for my soul. So those two things I would say have been the pillars right now on which I'm standing.
And those are two really important pillars. And what I would say is there may be an addiction framework that you're thinking about when you're talking about these things, but for trauma survivors, these are huge issues too,
Mm,
because we'll call it gossiping can be a huge part of trauma bonds and triangulation, things that can happen. And also, something that is being talked about more is the fawning response, like to trauma, which is
mm,
where you're people pleasing and there's a lot of unconscious lying that happens out of fear, and it's about exactly what you said, managing the response. And so I love
mhm.
that you shared this because I think this is applicable in so many ways, which is one of the reasons why your book speaks to so many people. We can just bring it always back to your book because it's translatable to many different situations. So
Mm.
thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Lisa.
And the last thing I'm going to ask you is how do people find you so that they can get their book clubs together
That's right.
and have you come?
I love that. The easiest way to find me, if you can spell my name, I'll spell it for you now, is my website, which is lauracathcartrobbins.com. That's LauraCathcartrobbins.com. I'm also on Instagram, but it's the same name. It's Laura Cathcart Robbins at Laura Cathcart Robbins. I'm not really on other social media. I have a TikTok account, I have X, and I have Facebook, but I don't cruise those very often. So Instagram and my website are the easiest ways to reach me.
And they should listen to your podcast.
Please. Yes.
And if you missed any of that, it will be in the show notes. So it'll be very easy to find. Well, Laura, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It is my deep honor to have you here, to have this time with you, and just thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I was really looking forward to this, and you always exceed expectations. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about this week's guest, please see the show notes for this episode. But before you go, I would love it if you would text the show if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or leave a comment on YouTube letting me know your biggest takeaway for this episode or what you loved most about it. And speaking of your comments, I want to thank each and every one of you for the comments that you have shared thus far and the ways that you've reached out to me through email, my Substack, and all of the different ways that you have to connect with me. It has been such an honor to get your feedback and to hear what you love about the podcast. Thank you so, so, so much. I look forward to engaging with it more in the future. And listeners, if you haven't had a chance to connect with me or to share something about the podcast, I would love to hear from you too. Until next time, please remember that your story matters. And as you work on it, you change lives, especially your own.